On a cold February morning in Idaho, a woman was found dead inside her own bathroom, a bathtub filled with water, a gun nearby, and a story that, at first, seemed simple, a tragic suicide. But what if everything about that scene was carefully staged? What if the truth was far darker than anyone first imagined? This is the case of Kendy Howard, a case that began as an apparent suicide and later turned into a courtroom battle over murder, deception, and hidden violence behind closed doors. And the question still lingers: was it really suicide, or something far more calculated? Kendy Howard was a woman living in Idaho, known by people close to her as someone who tried to keep her life together despite personal struggles behind the scenes. To the outside world, her life appeared ordinary: quiet home life, family responsibilities, and daily routines like anyone else. But as investigators later discovered, appearances can be misleading. Behind closed doors, her marriage to her husband, Dan Howard, was not as peaceful as it seemed. Friends and family would later describe signs of emotional tension, control issues, and a relationship that had begun to deteriorate over time. Like many domestic cases that later turn into criminal investigations, there were no obvious public warnings of what would eventually happen. But investigators would later argue that the warning signs were there, just not noticed in time. It was the morning of February 2nd, 2021, when emergency services received a distressing 911 call. The caller was Dan Howard, Kendy's husband. He reported that he had found his wife inside the bathroom. She was in the bathtub, and she had been shot. He told authorities it looked like suicide. When police arrived at the scene, they were met with a disturbing sight: a woman deceased in a bathtub, a firearm present, and a husband insisting he had no idea what had happened. At first glance, it looked like a possible self-inflicted gunshot wound. But investigators are trained to do one thing above all else: look beyond the first impression. And almost immediately, questions began to form. As investigators examined the bathroom, certain details didn't fit a simple suicide narrative: the position of the body, the condition of the firearm, and inconsistencies in the timeline of events. One of the first concerns was the physical dynamics of a self-inflicted gunshot wound in water. Cases like this are rare, and forensic specialists know what to expect when they do occur. But something felt off. Investigators also looked at blood patterns, gunshot trajectory, the placement of the weapon, signs of struggle or restraint. While no single detail immediately proved foul play, the combination of inconsistencies raised suspicion. Another key factor was Kendy's physical condition and the plausibility of her carrying out the act in the way described. And then there was the behavior of the scene itself. Nothing about it felt fully consistent. So instead of closing the case quickly, detectives decided something critical. They treated it as an undetermined death pending investigation. That decision would change everything. The autopsy became one of the most important turning points in the case. Medical examiners analyzed cause of death, wound characteristics, toxicology results, signs of trauma beyond the gunshot. Initially, there was uncertainty, but as more experts reviewed the findings, a theory began to emerge that challenged the suicide explanation. Some forensic specialists argued that there were indicators inconsistent with a straightforward, self-inflicted gunshot wound. This opened the door to a deeper question: could Kendy have been incapacitated before the gunshot? Prosecutors later suggested a theory that changed the direction of the entire case: that Kendy may have been physically assaulted prior to death, possibly strangled or suffocated, and then placed in the bathtub to stage the scene. The gunshot, they argued, may have been used as a final step to create confusion about what really happened. This was no longer just a questionable death. It was becoming a potential homicide investigation. As investigators dug deeper, attention turned toward Dan Howard. His statements to police were reviewed multiple times. Detectives looked at his timeline of events, his 911 call, his movements before and after the incident, his relationship history with Kendy. Like many domestic homicide investigations, the spouse became a key person of interest, not because of assumption, but because of inconsistency. Prosecutors later argued that Dan's version of events did not align fully with forensic findings. They also examined whether there was possible motive tied to marital issues. However, it's important to note, motive alone does not prove guilt. What mattered more was physical evidence and reconstruction of the scene. And that evidence, according to investigators, began to tell a different story than the one first reported. At first, this case could have easily been closed as a suicide. Many similar cases are. But investigators did something crucial. They refused to rush. As forensic analysis continued, prosecutors eventually concluded that the evidence pointed towards staged suicide rather than self-inflicted death. Their theory was Kendy was killed elsewhere in the home or incapacitated. The body was placed in the bathtub. A firearm was positioned to suggest suicide. The scene was arranged to mislead investigators. This type of staging is not uncommon in domestic homicide cases, but it is extremely difficult to prove without strong forensic evidence. Eventually, the case reached the level where authorities believed they had enough evidence to proceed with charges. Dan Howard was arrested and charged with murder. When the case reached court, both sides presented sharply different narratives. Prosecution argument: the death was not a suicide. The scene had been staged. Physical evidence contradicted self-inflicted death. The defendant's statements were inconsistent. Defense argument: no direct eyewitness evidence. Possibility of suicide could not be completely ruled out. Forensic interpretation was disputed. The courtroom became a battle of experts, medical examiners, forensic analysts, and investigators, each presenting competing interpretations of the same evidence. After reviewing all testimony and evidence, the jury reached a verdict. Dan Howard was found guilty of second-degree murder and domestic battery. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. The case of Kendy Howard left behind more than just a legal outcome. It left unanswered emotional questions. How often do staged scenes go unnoticed? How many deaths initially ruled as suicide may deserve deeper investigation? And how fragile is the line between assumption and truth in early investigations? For Kendy's family and loved ones, the verdict brought legal closure, but not emotional resolution. Because behind every case like this is a human story that doesn't end in court. This case reminds us of one powerful truth. Not every scene tells the truth at first glance, and sometimes the real story only emerges when every detail is questioned, even the ones that seem obvious. The death of Kendy Howard remains one of those cases where initial assumptions were challenged and ultimately changed forever. What do you think? Was justice truly served, or are there still unanswered questions?